Hi, welcome to the Second Wind Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Gonsalves. Hannah, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. So we're going to chat and this podcast is all about the transition that you've had from being an Olympian. Well, once an Olympian, always Olympian. So very much about your transition to your life after sport and what's going on in your world today.
Sorry. Go on.
Oh, good. So we're gonna let our internet speeds catch us up, but I'll kick in because one of the bits for those who don't know who you are, Hannah, tell us who you are and what you're up to nowadays.
So I'm Hannah Campbell-Pegg. I competed for Australia in the sport of Luge, which is very foreign for most Australians. It's a sport where you slide feet first down the ice at speeds up to 150 kilometres an hour for men and about 140 for women. Was back in my day anyway. I competed in 2006 and 2010 Winter Olympic Games, and I've been an official for the last three Olympics for our athlete Alexander Filazzo ever since, and hopefully he'll be going to his fourth Olympics in next year, the end of next year. And that's what I did as an athlete as well. So that was my sporting achievements.
Yes, well, that's good. Well, we can go in a little bit more. I mean, in terms of your sporting achievement, it is pretty cool especially coming from Australia. As you said, it is quite a foreign, a foreign sport for many Australians. But I am still curious because as much as I talk about it, today you're not in Australia. Today you find yourself as far away from snow and hills as possible.
Yes, I'm now living in Dubai. My husband got a job over here, so we moved the whole family 3 months ago and just trying out a very different side of life. I'm definitely missing trees and cool weather, and I'm actually craving rain for the first time in my life.
Wow.
But yes, I'd love to get back to some snow. Really love to get back to some, those nice warm jackets that you wrap yourself up in. But basically, whilst I'm here, I'm doing a PhD in climate change, on the impacts of climate change on winter sports, and I'm a sustainability consultant as well. And I'm a mum, so to two very energetic boys. I could add some other words in there, but they keep me on my toes.
This is what it's all about. So it's great.
Yeah, they keep me old. That's all I can say.
No, it's the opposite. They keep us young. That's it. They keep us having to move around and chase them, and the dog as well.
Yeah,
just to
and
add
I've got
to
a
that.
dog as well. I'm a mum to a little fur ball, but who's 5 months old and still learning his ways.
Yeah, awesome. Now, we did mention, and we opened up at least with you as an Olympian getting into luge. I'm curious though, for certainly someone growing up in Australia, how did you get into that sport? Where did it all start for you?
So I actually started. A friend of mine. I was watching the Olympics in 2002, and I remember watching luge, but didn't even think of luge. Thought of bobsleigh, and just coincidentally, a friend of a friend who ended up being a really good friend of mine in the end. He said, "Oh, we're looking for women for the women's bobsleigh team for Australia." So I called up and I said, "Look, I'm interested. I'd like to give this a go." I had to go down to some training facility that they had in Melbourne, and I flew down there, and they took everybody because there wasn't many people doing bobsleigh or putting their hands up to do bobsleigh. So we went over the end of 2002, we went and did a bobsleigh school where you learn how to drive and did all of that. And then I kept doing that for a couple of years, and then I pulled out of that, and cause I loved sliding, but just the atmosphere was quite toxic. And so I said, you know what, let's do something else. So I went and took up Luge, and in 2004, and went from that. But basically, it all came about through talking to a guy who's a good friend of mine now, and he competed for the Australian. Jeremy Rolliston, he competed for the Australian bobsleigh team. So he went to 2006 and 2010 as well as a bobsleigh athlete. But yeah, it basically all came about through that, and then started training, and from there on, the rest is history.
It seems like, it seems like it came from quite simply giving it a go. So seeing something that was interesting, opportune, and you thought, hey, why not? I'll just jump in, give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen?
And also it was, I'd done a lot of sport growing up. I played tennis, I played water polo, I swam, I wasn't a very good runner. But athletics was never really my thing, unless it was like the throwing events. So, I wasn't I was never a great runner, not a good running style. But I just decided, you know what, like this sport actually, it's challenging. It was something different. Everybody always says to you, so you pick. I remember one of the first interviews I had with Channel 7, and the guy said to me, oh, so you always wanted to be an Olympian, so you picked the easiest sport and went for it? And I was like, no, this is probably the most challenging thing I've ever done at that age. And then his next question was, couldn't make it in a summer sport, so thought you'd try winter. And meanwhile, I was like, you're not a very nice person. But I was like, no, this is, once again, like I'd never been exposed to winter sports as well. My mother had an aversion to the cold, and we pretty much were beach people. I spent every holidays at the beach. I'd never seen snow until I started doing bobsleigh, till I went to Canada. We didn't even see it in Europe the first time because it wasn't snowing then. And it was beautiful. Like, it was just great. It was such a challenge because it was so different from everything we'd been able to do and what we'd been offered in Australia. And I think that's what appealed to me as well, and in such a different environment too. But also amongst these people, just by giving it a go and having faith, I've made the most amazing friends and had the most amazing experiences.
Mm. Yeah. And so as you were growing up and going through the sport, academically, what was the balance like for you?
So the sport was like pretty much funded by me. We got some money from the AOC, but like it covered an airfare. And you lived overseas for 4 to 6 months of a year. And the International Federation would give you like a race allowance, which covered probably half your week's accommodation and food. So having to be self-funded, I'd already started my first year of university when I started doing bobsleigh. So I was doing sports science at UTS, and then and then after that as well, like I couldn't get a job coming back as well in between the Olympics, and so I ended up going into teaching, doing another degree in teaching, and that actually was such a good career to have whilst being an athlete, because I could come in, do casual work as much as I wanted, wherever I was in the world, wherever I was training. And then I could just go off and do my sport. And then, I was flying in, flying out. So I was gone, I was home for about 6 months of a year, and then off and doing training and so on as well. So, it was academically, it was always important to be, and my parents have always put a really strong emphasis on making sure I had an education, and that I wasn't allowed to just, I had to have something, and something I was working towards, and I couldn't just rely on my sporting, my sporting career to see me through my life. So
well, that's quite an interesting balance. Getting into teaching or becoming a teacher, it sounds a bit like you fell into it. You're doing sports science, you were making the Olympics. That's aligned to sport, but then in terms of finding a career that can help fund your athletic dreams? Did you fall into teaching, or is it something that you kind of intentionally said, boom, that's the career for me?
Well,
You
I
can be
was,
honest.
oh gosh, after Olympics, well, after the Olympics, I went and did, I think I did I did a physiology job working in nursing homes where I used to assess people, like, that's what I did with the sports science degree. Became a physiologist, and I was like, and then in the nursing home, I picked up scabies from one of the patients, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. And also, the job took me like traveling regionally, and I was like, I can't train when I'm away 5 days of a week. So it wasn't the
Yeah.
job for me. And then I ended up getting into a sales job, which also is not me. I'm not someone who can go and sell things.
What were you selling?
It was like a not a software, like a software, but a compliance software at the time. So, but
Okay.
I think I was 24 or something. I wasn't old, or wasn't as old as I am now. And you're learning new things, but also that's what these years are for, to discover what you like and what you don't like. Because at the same time, I was like, I do not want to do physiology unless I'm working with athletes. And so I was kind of looking at the degree that I had and thinking, wow, is this my life? But I remember my parents sitting me down and saying, you need to do a teaching degree, because my older sister was a teacher as
Okay.
well. And they said, you need to do a teaching degree. And that was always the plan, actually. When I first went to university, I was going to do human movement and a grad dip in education. And I was like,
Yeah.
and I pulled out of the diploma, and then they turned it into a degree. And I needed that time off anyway, I think, as well, to decide what I wanted to do. But my parents said, you need to have something. Teaching's a good, solid foundation. And so I went and did it. But it was only a year's degree as well. They condensed everything in because they were desperate for teaching. So I had this intense year of training,
Yeah.
working, and studying. So it was great though. I actually really enjoyed it and met some amazing people. And I really enjoyed it when I started doing my practicals and getting into it. And I've been a teacher now for 16 years. I've only just in February, March, resigned from teaching. But it's led me to then going and doing, like, I've now, due to being an athlete, I got a scholarship from the IOC to do a master's in sports ethics and integrity. So I went off and did that, and
Mhm.
now that's led me to doing a PhD. But from doing the masters, I was then doing university lecturing as well, which I thoroughly enjoy.
Right.
And I do love educating people. I love doing all of those type of things. So it's really something I'm quite passionate about. So as much as my parents were like, you need to do this, they obviously saw that I had something in me to go. And you need that nudge. I needed that nudge. That's
Yes.
me. I knew what I wanted to do, and
Why
it
did
was
they,
to be an athlete.
why did you nudge?
I need. I think I was a bit directionless career wise in between, because I didn't, like, there was no clear career path from being in
Mhm.
physiology, and then as a sales, in sales just wasn't my thing. But I kind of feel I was so focused on being an athlete, and on reflection, I needed that. And being a teacher, being a casual teacher, was actually such a good. I wish I'd done it sooner, because it was such a good
Mm.
career to have, to earn money. Because I was doing temp work
Yeah.
as well. I was working as a secretary, and I think at the time, I think I was earning something like $500 a week at working full time as a secretary, like as a receptionist and
Yeah.
office administration and so on, which I love, being around people. But then when I started being a teacher, I think I was making $300 a day, and I was like, yes, I've got it
Yeah.
paid. So as a
Well,
26-year-old or whatever it was at the time, I was like, oh, this is
yeah, yeah,
brilliant, thank you. So,
yeah, yeah.
and it was
What's
perfect.
also interesting, yeah, there you go. That's the bit I was going to say, is that what you've described is it's a career that you've since been able to do for the past 16 years, but it was also good because of that balance you had with your training when you were in the country, but then also being away for 4 to 6 months of the year.
Exactly. And what was great is you went out to schools, and the kids loved having me as their PE teacher. You got out there and you played soccer with the kids. They enjoyed it. And some of the schools that I went and taught at, some of those kids never had opportunities and so on. So it was great. I really enjoyed it. I thoroughly, being a PE teacher as well at the time, it was brilliant. I just loved mucking around with the kids. But then it led me into other work as well. I then started working at TAFE and I became an HSC coordinator. So it all started, leading into different things. I'm very much somebody who can sort of stick with something for 5 years, and then could be on the same sort of area of education or something, but you kind of got to take a bit of a sidestep or look at something different, just to challenge myself. That's something I generally tend to do.
Yeah, which is good. It keeps mixing things up, without a doubt. It removes the monotony. But still talking about monotony in some respects, as an athlete, there is the need for that disciplined training. How did you, quite simply, how did you approach training, being overseas for 6 months, getting that sort of discipline in there, and then coming back to teaching? What did you have, like 2 different personas that you brought in, or how did you manage that?
Pretty much, it was. If anything, circuit was more relaxing for me. And usually when I used to get back on circuit, because I would go from getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning straight to training. I being a routine athlete, every night everything would be set up ready to go for the whole day. Clothes would be packed for work. I'd have all my training clothes lined out so that I could literally step into my sneakers and, put my clothes on and go straight to the gym, and I'd be out the door in 10 minutes and driving 40 minutes to the gym, doing a session early in the morning, and then coming straight back to school on the way back, teaching a day, and then heading back to either training in the afternoon or the evening after school. And the great thing about school is, being a casual teacher, you didn't have to mark, you didn't have to do reports or any of that stuff. So you'd finish school at 3 o'clock and that was it. I'd be like, sweet, I could go training now. So it was, my day was mine. And then, when I was doing uni, I was doing all the assignments in the meantime. It actually gave me a lot of discipline. It gave me a lot of structure that I needed with my personality type as well. So I found doing more, I achieved more because I really, there was that monotony, but I enjoyed that monotony at that stage of my life. Bring up kids now without monotony.
By your personality?
My personality is I don't know how's best to describe it.
Go for it.
Some might describe it as ADHD right now, but if you wanted to put a label on it. But I've always been someone who's very energetic, very will always give anything a go, will always, put 1,000% into something if I want to do that. And I'll always go for it and work like a little bulldog until it's done. But yeah, and it's funny, part of that has subsided as I've got older as well. I think, you kind of, you prioritize things a bit better when you're older, but when you're young, you, and also life experience as well. But also I don't have the priorities. I didn't have the priorities back then that I have now with, keeping other humans alive. And that takes up a lot of time. But it's, I was just somebody who, I needed that structure to be able to achieve what I wanted to do. My days were very routine. It was the alarm went off at this time every day. And I remember reading this article that Ian Thorpe was interviewed, and they were talking about what time in the morning do you get up? And it was something like, 4:28. And they're like, why not 4:30? Why not 4? Because he said, I'd have to get up at 4:25 or something. And he's like, but that extra 3 minutes every day leads to an extra, 15 minutes for the 5 days of the week. I was like, boom. So true. Yeah. And I actually do that now too. Ever since I read that article, I'm like, I know the extra 2 minutes, that's going to make a big difference to my life.
I still do that. It's like, I'm like, no, what time you get up? 5:58. Not 6? No. I'm up before 6.
Nope.
So
I need.
okay.
So I'm dressed by 6. Yeah, it's funny. Like you still
That's it.
use that mentality as well as you still take this
Yeah.
approach, and that's one of the things from sport. Like taking the sport mentality and putting it into everything else that I'm doing now in life. I've been able to apply
Yeah.
it to so many things, and I always remember I was at the New South Wales Institute of Sport, and they used to run a lot of the courses as well for athletes with retirement and so on. And one of the things that one of the like Olympians got up, and he was now quite successful in business, and he said, look, you start your career later, but you're going to jump a lot quicker up in your career because of what you've learned and what you've been able to do as an athlete. And it was so true, because when I did exactly that, and I jumped quite quickly in what I was doing within education, and then and then my priorities changed and had kids and became a mum, and then that's and now it's sort of, and then my interests changed as well. So when I went into integrity, it
That's
was
fine.
sort of starting back at the bottom again. But all the experience that I'd had in sport was completely usable, and you still take the same approach to a lot of things. So it's definitely
That's right.
been.
Well, it's like an accelerator. It's like an accelerant, an accelerator that you bring in. So finishing sport, coming into what one could describe as the real world, it's a case of, well, finding out, well, what are the steps that I need to do regularly in order to catch up or get ahead or quite simply be or feel successful. And it's that dedication and focus to, well, just get that done. It's like, well, this is what it takes. That's what I have to do. So I'm going to do that. Right? So
And I
for,
think
for
having
you,
to do a lot myself. Sorry, yeah. I
keep going,
think
keep
having
going.
to do a lot for myself as well, like as an athlete, like I had to plan my whole seasons. I didn't have managers. I had to book all my own flights. I had to get myself, with at the time like 4 bags on and off trains, like with 4 minutes in between connections and so on, and just find my way from A to B, by looking at German timetables and things and try and work it out. And I think those skills that came as a byproduct of me being an athlete have really helped me in the future. Like there was no mollycoddling like back in those, like coaches were like, do it yourself, get
No.
here, do that. It was very hard, and I think they gave me some really important life skills, and that was it. I look back and I'm like, ooh, they probably wouldn't get away with half of these things now. But I look back and I actually appreciate some of them now because I've been given some great skills.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you start to realize, I'm not going to do this circuit again? It's time for me to think about what's next.
I actually got, after every Olympics, well, not after 2006, I was like, I really want to keep going because I don't just want to, I qualified after 19 weeks on ice. So I didn't want to be like a one-hit wonder, let's just do that, I'm an Olympic tourist. That was something I didn't want to be. And it was interesting because nobody talked to me, like the established people, the established athletes from all the other countries. A lot of them didn't talk to me until I came back after the Olympics because they thought I was just going to be a tourist. And some of my best mates, they're like, oh, we didn't think you'd be there the next year. So I was like, cheers, thanks. That's
Wow.
great. Yep.
Yeah.
So it was, that was 2 years I endured of that treatment.
Yeah.
But it was still, it was great. And then I came back and everything just got better and better as like athletically as I kept going. But so after 2010, I sort of thought, oh, do I keep going with this? And I still loved it. And I'd set my sights on 2014 as being my retirement. But in 2012, I got really sick. I just kept getting sick. I could not recover. I think what happened was I just had a complete burnout, like physically and probably mentally as well. But physically, I just totally burnt out. And my body was just saying, you need to stop. And I could not get over any of these illnesses. And so I'd go to a training session, I'd feel better, go to a training session, and then I'd be in bed for 2 days because I remember going to work as well. And I think what had happened was I was, working, I was training all the time, then I was studying, then I was working, and I just probably was the tip of the iceberg. And then I got really sick overseas and I had to call the rest of the season, finish the season. early, 2 weeks early. It was in World Championships. I actually ended up collapsing at the track and being sent to hospital, and they were like, okay. And that was kind of the tip of the iceberg. And then after that, that whole year, I was just battling illness. And I'd go to work as well. I remember being a teacher, and I'd have a period off, and I'd go and sit in my car, pass out, fall asleep because I was so tired. I'd set my alarm and then get back up, go and teach the next class. So, and I was diagnosed with an adrenal burnout, they said at the time. So, and it took a while to actually recover from that. I had to totally look at my whole diet again, go on so many different supplements. And I was still like, oh, can I do this? Do I want to do this? And actually, I met my husband at that time when I was going through this whole transition. Like, I was losing hair. I was like, my whole body was just breaking down. Yeah. And I remember we went overseas because he's from England, so we went for Christmas overseas, and we went to Germany, and we stood at a track when the World Cup was there. And I remember standing on the other side of the track and being like, actually, I'm really happy being here outside of the track rather than in it. So I was like, okay, so I've got a little bit of peace now, and I went to the Olympics with my athlete Alex, and I was like, okay, this is actually good. I'm glad I'm not competing here. Yeah. So it was a process, but it was a long process. And I remember when I was still thinking about it, and when I was getting sick and sort of recovering, I remember going into we had a kitchen above the gym at Enswiss, and we went in there, and Louise Savage was there, and I always remember it was really, like, I remember this moment because we were talking in the kitchen, and she said, she probably doesn't remember, but I distinctly remember it because I'd said to her, I'm thinking of, I don't know where I should keep going. I don't know. And she said, oh, yes, it's like this whole identity crisis. You're really sort of questioning what you're doing. And it really stuck with me as well. And I was like, oh, if Louise Savage had an identity crisis now, that was immaturity probably back then, thinking that. But now I'm like, oh, of course she did. Like, we all do, because that was our identity. And one of my friends, when I was struggling with the whole transition, and because everybody calls me Peggy, like my nickname's Peggy, and everyone's like, oh, but you're Peggy the Luger. Like, that's what everybody calls you. They always introduce you as Peggy the Luger. And so it's creating this whole new identity afterwards, and having to get comfortable with that. Like, I didn't want to be Peggy the teacher. That wasn't me. So, but yeah. So
well, how did you get through that process, and what did you want to be?
I honestly had no idea. Like, I was just teaching because that was something I needed to do. And then I ended up, being moved into a different role in teaching, and that became more important. And then, and I'd met my husband as well. We weren't married by that time. But I started, it was honestly with a great amount of support from my friends, from just only a few friends, like a handful. Some did not get it. But it was funny. It was all the athletes who had been through it before, and just like two in particular were always calling, always asking me how it was, always seeing how I was, and
what do you think just check it. So it was checking in with you, or was it something bigger and more complicated than that?
They were checking in because, look, I wasn't, I was down. Like, I was really down. I thought things would be different. You think your life's going to turn out a little bit differently. I was going to retire on my terms in 2014, do a third Olympics, and that was it. I was going to, get a PB. 2010, it was totally messed up the Olympics because they'd lowered the start heights in the track. So pretty much everything you trained for 4 years just sort of threw out the window. But that was due to circumstances out of everybody's control. And so all these plans that I had, and I'd also set myself up for life after retirement, with degrees, with a career. I'd been working on teaching, but also I was a PE teacher. There weren't permanent jobs. I didn't get given a permanent job straight after. So I was still doing casual work. But then my other role at TAFE ended up giving me another job, and it took time, but I had great support from my strength and conditioning coach as well at the time too. another one of the other girls retired on circuit too, and that was great. So a few of us did, and I spoke around to a mix of people from Australia and both internationally, and that was good. But it was a really tough time, and I just literally had to just keep going. Every day was just, okay, just get up, just keep going. And I couldn't afford, because I was pretty broke after being an athlete, I couldn't afford to take a day off work. So if instead of like actually taking the time and healing, I still had to get up every day and just go to work and just do all those. But the thing as well, like I felt like I had a family in N-Swiss as well. We had a really good little winter crew that we all trained together, a whole bunch of athletes we were all training. And what kind of, you just got cut off from the gym. Like that was it. You couldn't go training. You couldn't do that. Once you decided you were retiring, that was it. See you later. So, and that, I actually think that really affected things too, because then, you know, I was back at a normal gym with normal people getting harassed because, you know, I'm on the bench press and that's not where women should be. So it was interesting, but I did have like specific friends. I have one who used to be like, okay, let's go to the gym together. Let's do that, you know, and then I had another friend who like had to retire from sport in a pretty horrific way as well. And so we hung out a lot and we did a lot together. And it was having those, even though there weren't many people, but it was having that support network.
Yeah, it's like this organic network, not structured or designed intentionally to support you, but through friends and having those who reached out and, you know, said, let's go to the gym together and did things, you know, that it sounds was really positive experience for you, you know, accidentally, but it actually has helped get you through. So then what came next? Because you go in doing the studying, well, not the studying of ethics, but how did you get back involved or stay involved in the sport and, you know, come through the Olympics?
So I still ran the Luge Australia, as we call it, the National Federation for Luge in Australia. So, you know, I had to still do everything to try and make sure Alex, and we had some other athletes at the time, could still compete and still, you know, run the federation in that way. And I still do run the federation as well. So 20 years now.
From Dubai as well now.
So yeah, that's how I kept in it. And, you know, I've really enjoyed that side of things as well. I mean, some athletes, they retire and they're like, nah, don't want anything to do with the sport. But, I mean...
Yeah, what is it you enjoy about it?
Look, Luge, we're a very different sport in the fact that everyone internationally is a family. We all get along. We all live together. Like my roommates were Romanian and Slovenian and Canadian. So you shared rooms and in tiny little pensions in Germany. You were sharing beds with these people. I had a Romanian who didn't speak a word of English to me, and I was still sharing a bed with her for months.
But see, this is the thing. These are your competitors, right?
Yeah.
These are the people who well, at least from the outside looking in, these are the people who you want to beat. But listening to you, it doesn't sound like, well, you were kind of competing against them. You're sort of competing with them and, you know, speaking about getting your own personal bests. You know,
and at the end of the day,
what was that?
We used to organise. What was really nice is so we'd have what's called a qualifying cup you'd have to do, which was called Nations Cup. So you qualify for the World Cup the next day because they only took 24 people and 10 were already pre-selected. So 14 people would go through out of all the rest of us. And then either the men would compete the next day or the women would compete. So when it was the day after the qualifying cup or the day after the World Cup, all the women used to go out and we'd have a pizza. We'd always, every track, we'd all have a pizza night. And it was, you know, all the US team, all the Canadian teams, the Slovakians, it was the Austrians, Japanese, Italian. We'd all go out, we'd have these huge pizza nights, and it was always my coach as well, who was the only male who turned up. And because his fiance was Canadian. But it was we would have these great dinners, and we had so much fun. We did, and every night we'd be like, "Hey, you did really well in that race! Congratulations!" And we all, I remember when and she's still one of my best mates. She won the silver medal at the Olympics in 2010. And we went out that night partying and congratulating her because it is a family, and we have such a close relationship with all of those people on circuit. They're the ones you're always not going to get along with as well, but majority you do, and you've got that understanding, and you all really appreciate each other and their achievements as well. It was everybody's kind of competitive edge wasn't. I mean, like, once you came, you bought your A game to the start handles, and that was it. But off the track, you're all mates, and we're family. We all looked out for each other. If somebody had an accident, was in hospital, everybody would come and visit and send flowers and look after everybody. And that was the same for guys and girls. We all took care of our own, and each of the teams. My coach one day got so sick, and I was solo. There was this hideous gastro bug going around. We had norovirus. Everybody got norovirus in the hotel, and I had no coach. And but then straight then, there's the Austrian coach. He's barely spoken to me before. He's like, "Let me take your sled. Let me sort it out. Because you have to leave your sleds outside for a certain amount of time so that they cool down and reach the temperature checks." And they're like, "You just go and focus on you and being an athlete, and I'll take care of this." And
Wow.
And it was amazing. And then I had the Slovakian coach did exactly the same thing. My old coach was like, "Sweet, I'm here. I can help you out. No worries. Let me get everything. I'll get it for you at the end." And that was the type of that's how everybody helps. And Alex, if I look at Alex now as an athlete, I mean, he trains and competes with the Canadian team, and he got 5th in the world. Like, it was, nobody everybody's so happy for him and wants to see him do better and better. Nobody tries to sabotage equipment or do any of those things. We're a family. It's very unique, and that's what's so great. And that's why I'm still involved, because I just came back from the conference a couple of weeks ago, and they're all people that I used to compete against years ago, and we're still there, all trying to help the sport grow and help the sport get better and so on. So it's it's a family.
Yes, yeah. It sounds quite unique in that competitive edge that you're all there together growing the sport and increasing that participation. Like you say, once you get in the start gate, boom, you're off and you are competing. If anything, it sounds like you're more competing with the course and your own personal best rather than that other athlete.
You compete against the clock at the end of the day, and that's it. Like, that was nice. Look, there were athletes there that were competing against each other and kept to themselves, and you just learnt not to. But we always looked at it and we're like, they've missed out, because we've all got friends for life, So that's
Yeah, and I guess like you say, that's what has kept you in the sport. That family, that vibe has really kept you there. And so today, your impact is less about you as the athlete, much more about you as part of that, one governing body, but also I'm interested in some of the studies, or at least where your academic studies has taken you, and some of the thoughts and, I guess the bits that you're uncovering there. I mean, talk to me a bit about that type of impact.
So the PhD or the integrity side of things?
Well, I quite like both, to be honest. Both of them are interesting. So let's kick off with integrity.
Yeah, so the Masters was really interesting. It was once again, and this is what I like about the academic world. It's like being on circuit again, because you get to travel all around the world, talking to different people from different walks of life and different cultures, and that's what I like as well. It's a family within itself, different family, but it's and I think I've kind of replicated being an athlete, but in academia as well, because it's a very similar sort of traveling aspect to it, which I love traveling. I love seeing the world, and I love meeting people from around the world. So I got into integrity basically because you're looking at your different areas of integrity, which are safeguarding in sport and match fixing, anti-doping. What else? But we looked into the philosophical side of these things as well. I originally didn't think it was a philosophy master's. So I got there, and in the first 2 weeks, he's like, "Oh," and I was like, "What? We're doing philosophy?" Not my um, my amazing abilities in philosophy, but
Wasn't
actually it's
walked in.
no, it wasn't what I expected, but it was. But then as I went along, I'm like, oh, this has actually really changed my whole way of thinking about everything. And what was really interesting is working with other people.
Abs-
Um, from there, it was amazing, and because you had these huge conversations with your whole class on with a whole bunch of people from different cultures and their take on safeguarding in sport or their experience. So, we had like I've had my experiences in safeguarding. I've had my experiences with anti-doping, not ever testing positive or anything, but just doing the tests and actually physically doing that. And they're
just for
always
everyone's cool.
yeah,
That's good.
it's just that was all fine. But like some of these people in this room have never had to do an anti-doping test, where you have somebody actually physically looking at you whilst you're going to the bathroom, and that in itself, like, as an athlete, feels a bit violating and so on. So it's
Yeah.
interesting talking and talking about your experiences, but also hearing other experiences from other cultures, because there were 7 Olympians in my course as well. And so hearing some of their experiences, and one had missed out on a gold medal at the Olympics, and the person who got the gold medal had tested positive to drugs. And so it was this amazing course where we learned so many different things. And then about match fixing, which I hadn't actually had a lot of involvement in. But then I had this passion for sustainability and climate change. But then even then, they had a different take on sustainability than I did. And I was like, I like the environmental side of things. And they were more about sustaining sport the way it is. And so, but it was interesting. So, but you had all these lecturers with different experience, but also people who came in from the international safeguarding agency as well, and come and talk to you and tell you about their experiences. And some were heartbreaking, some were fantastic, but it just sort of drove this. And I think doing this later in life as well, with as much behind me from an sports administrative perspective, but also from an athlete perspective, it added a totally new dimension to it as well. And I feel like if I'd done this degree at 21, after doing, my first degree and doing a master's like this, I just wouldn't have had a clue what I was doing. Whereas in the end,
How did it change? So how did it change your perspective?
I realised, sadly, how much sport was in trouble. Like from a governance perspective, from all of these different things, sadly, it kind of takes away from the beauty of sport, if you know what I mean, like what we're there for, And for me, I love sport because it's a way to, to get rid of so many things. Physically, you're exerting yourself, you're having to mentally think about something, but you're also you're out in nature, and that's what and it's an escape for a lot of people. But and then to have all this other noise and integrity going on in the background, it was hard not to come out of that course with a bit of a sort of negative view of how sport's going to go in the future. But I mean, with all these people working on everything and trying to make it better, it's actually it's quite hopeful in a way as well. But doing what they can for everybody. But yeah, I mean, look, the safeguarding side of things just was quite heartbreaking. But I then got this passion. Well, I've always had a passion for the environment. Always, I've noticed as well as I've gone to the last 5 Olympics and been on circuit, like how little snow there is, like especially in China in 2022. They claim to be the first Olympics that was all done on artificial snow, and I'm like, well, yeah, you're the first ones that actually say you are. The others all probably did it too. You're the first ones that have admitted it. But you just see less and less snow. You see these warming temperatures. Right. You see so much of the sports, so much of the sports becoming so artificial in winter that I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And how do we? So that's how my PhD got created with how do we reimagine these sports so that what they look like in a climate changed world. So that's what I'm investigating at the moment.
That's some investigation that you've embarked upon there. To, like you said, well, if I take what you've said, it's how might we reimagine winter sports when there's no winter temperatures?
Yeah, well, and it's specifically looking at sliding sports, so bobsleigh, skeleton, and luge. But in that process, it's looking at what other sports have done around the globe as well to reimagine their sports. Like if you look at Sail GP, they've actually brought in a whole new league that's an impact league as well. So boats that are only purely on sailing. There's no. It's really interesting. What some of these sports have actually done to try and mitigate
Yeah.
the impacts of climate change so that these sports still survive. But I mean, if you look at winter sports and a lot of sports, like look at the heat, like here living in Dubai, for my kids to play sport, it's got to be in an air-conditioned gym. That's because otherwise the risks of heat stroke and potentially, especially with a kid, death from heat stroke is a lot higher. Like in Australia, we don't have the same death rates of heat as around the globe, and because we're used to the heat, we're set up for dealing with it. It's funny, like when you get people that come out, not to be critical of the English, but they're the ones that come and visit because my husband's English, and they all want to go and fry themselves on a beach at like 1:00 or go for a jog in the middle of summer at 1:00 or just sit there and sunbake. And we're like, mate, you go to the beach at 7:00 in the morning, you're home at 10:00 before the sunrise, and you don't go back until 5 or 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Like you don't even go near it. So
You're there at 50 degrees. You're really not going to feel the benefit.
No, exactly. So it's and that's how we've grown up. Whereas it's interesting reading about it all and how they go about doing it here. I mean, look, even here in Saudi Arabia, they're building an indoor like ski complex, and they're talking for their Asian Games, but it's all going to be artificial and all going to be indoors. So is that the way of the future? Is that how our Winter Olympics are going to be from now on, or are they going to still exist? So that's
I mean, it's fascinating. It's just the area of study, but also how for you as a Winter Olympian, an Australian Winter Olympian, now looking at this reimagination of winter sports, to me is just it's all wonderfully put together to mean that whole perspective on sport, on participation is, I know it's just going to be different, but I think it's a fascinating area to be looking at.
It's
how
also,
the sport continue.
And it's all come about purely because I gave it a go, like back in 2022. Like the things that have happened because of this, and there's something I could say to my old self when I was, back in 2012. I've always looked at things and been like, oh, this will pass. This will pass. I will feel different. That's life. I've always kind of flicked those kind of things off to the side. But it has, and everything that I did back then, like at the start of my career in 2002, as an athlete, has all led to this experience. And so what I could say to other athletes is that whatever you're learning so many great skills right now, and you've got to kind of realize that you will be able to utilize and use those, and use the passion that you have in sport to go and be able to apply that in so many other areas. Like it's just channeling that energy into a different sort of area as well after sport.
Yeah. So for you, taking your experience and thinking about those athletes that are coming through now that share your Olympic dream, and I guess for many it's going to be in that reimagined version of what winter sport might be. But for those who are pursuing that Olympic dream and they're well on their way, what tips do you give to them to help them to prepare for life after their sport?
I always look, and I feel like I fail with my own athlete at the moment, because for 3 Olympic rounds now, I've been telling him since he was 18, I've been saying you need to think about what you're going to do after sport. But you can lead a horse to water, and he's a great guy. But you can, I would personally, I'm very glad I had my parents who put such an emphasis on education. Education doesn't mean university, it means an education in some other area to get some other skill that you are interested in. Because I think if you have such a narrow focus, I think it's a lot harder to recover from as well. And that's it. Whereas if you've got broad interests, like, I mean, after teaching PE, I then was like, I don't want to be a 50-year-old PE teacher blowing a whistle on an oval. So I actually went into design tech, because I've always loved design. I've always loved creating things as well. And it was another side of my personality. So I actually went into design and technology, went back to university, did a few more subjects, and became a design and tech teacher, which I've been for the last 7 years. And I've loved it. Like, that whole creative side of me as well was something. And it, like, as you were saying, like, organically these things have sort of come about. And I just say, keep all your options open, but don't cut off your, like, even if it's one subject you're doing a semester, do something so that you're actually, because the amount of times that you would just be at home potentially sitting on a computer, or the amount of times you look at social media or on your telephone or something, you could be doing your reading and finishing a course very quickly. And athletes do. Like, one of the things that my supervisor said to me, and one of the reasons why he took me on as well, was because for my PhD, because he's like, Olympians get it done. They make very good PhD students. They make very good but athletes. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be an Olympian. It could just be an athlete, because they're very disciplined and they work towards goals. And I said to him the other day, I'm like, okay, I need dates, because that's how I work, and I need to work from a date and I need to work backwards. And he's like, I like to hear that. That's good, And it's funny, here I am, 12 years out from being an athlete, and I still apply the same things, like these same life skills that I've learned. But I just say, make sure you keep your options open and you don't close those things until it's, because when you're 30 and you're having to then go and try and get yourself a career and trying to get yourself a degree and things like that. Yes, you'll get them a lot quicker, but it might take a big adjustment. Whereas if you've been working on it in the background already and looking at some skills, and just even getting some work experience, if you've got a free day off training, why not go and get some work experience somewhere? It doesn't have to be paid. If you don't need to be paid, just go and, I want to get into this career. Let's see what I can do. And there's always such a good network through all the athletes, and people that sit on the boards of teams and the boards of, the institutes of sport. There's always people that'll put you in touch with somebody, but there's also LinkedIn too. So that's how I've made most of my contacts now, is I just reach out to people on LinkedIn. And I'm like, hey, just wondering, can we have a chat? And it's amazing how many people will just, yep, sure, I've got next week. Let's chat on Teams, 30 minutes. And people, there's so many people who will give you the time of day. And if they don't, that's somebody you don't want to be around. So, but there are so many people that will, I had one guy reach out to me 2 days ago, and I just said, great, let's chat. How about give me a day and a time and let's set up a Teams. And so I had a meeting yesterday with somebody that, I need to sort out, and it was the same thing. She doesn't know me. I know her by name, but we just reached out on LinkedIn and that was it. And I think that's how you and I met as well. So it's an amazing resource for getting in contact with people.
Yeah, fully agree. And look, Hannah, I suppose for those who are listening and are going to, now you're going to have them reaching out, but where's the best place to find you? LinkedIn, Instagram? How do we follow your journey?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably, I'm pretty bad at posting anything, but I'm always contactable on LinkedIn. So I do look at messages and things, like when they come through, I get them and I do always answer them. But yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm old, so I do have a Facebook, but that's pretty hidden as well. I'm never on it, but I never post anything either. Yeah. So I'm not a prolific poster. I do keep thinking, I should probably post something on LinkedIn, but I just don't.
At least take a picture of children, put it on Facebook. I mean, this is it, a minimum. No, I'm joking.
I know. I think my profile picture from LinkedIn is me at 2010 Olympics. So, but it's Hannah Campbell-Pegg, but OLY at the end of it. And anyone can find me on there and contact me. I'm always happy to have chat. So it's and
Wonderful.
always happy to do that. If anybody needs any help or any guidance on things, or is interested in climate change or sustainability, I'm more than happy. Or talking about pathways to get into things. Or if there's any contacts I can help somebody out with. Like, it's amazing how, if you reach out, how many people really do just want to help other people and connect them.
Yeah. And look, given that, Hannah, I've got to say thank you for joining me on the show today. This was all about reaching out to help others who are starting or going through the transition, or, finish retirement and are thinking, hey, what can I do? So you sharing your story has been absolutely wonderful. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.